The war-scarred landscape of Zalara was silent, save for the crackling of fires and the distant hum of war machines. Among the ruins, Caden Thorne, a human war medic, moved cautiously, his sharp eyes scanning for survivors. His mission was clear: find and assist those left behind in the chaos of conflict. As he navigated the debris, a faint, desperate cry pierced the stillness. Following the sound, he discovered a makeshift shelter constructed from scraps of metal and cloth. Inside, Lyria, an alien woman with shimmering silver skin, cradled her young daughter, Nyla, both of them bruised and malnourished. Lyria's violet eyes met his with a mix of defiance and desperation. "Stay back," she warned, her voice trembling. "We don't need your pity." "I'm not here to pity anyone," Caden replied calmly, kneeling at the entrance. "I'm here to help." Lyria hesitated, torn between pride and survival. Nyla, too weak to speak, clung to her mother's arm. Finally, Lyria lowered her guard, allowing Caden to step inside. As Caden assessed their injuries, he asked, "Why hasn't anyone helped you?" Lyria's lips tightened into a bitter smile. "Because I dared to challenge the overseers. They stripped us of everything, branded us as traitors, and left us to die." Caden frowned, anger simmering beneath his professional demeanor. "They abandoned you because you stood up for what's right." "Yes," Lyria replied, her voice heavy with bitterness. "And now, everyone is too afraid to stand with us." Caden met her gaze, his expression resolute. "Not everyone." He reached for his medical kit and began tending to their wounds with gentle precision. "Your daughter has a fever," he said. "We need to get her hydrated and out of this cold. I have a medical outpost nearby. Will you come with me?" Lyria's protective instincts flared. "Why are you doing this? What's in it for you?" Caden's eyes softened. "Because someone has to care. And right now, that someone is me." As night fell, Caden led Lyria and Nyla through the ruins, his every step calculated to avoid patrols and hidden dangers. The war-torn landscape was treacherous, filled with craters and the remnants of long-abandoned machinery. Lyria carried Nyla, her every step driven by sheer willpower despite her own injuries. "How much farther?" she asked, her voice strained. "Not far," Caden reassured her, glancing back to offer a faint smile. "Just a little longer, and you'll be safe." As they pressed on, Lyria watched Caden with growing curiosity. His movements were precise, his demeanor calm despite the ever-present danger. She couldn't help but ask, "You're not like the others. Why?" Caden hesitated before answering. "I've seen too much suffering to stand by and do nothing. People like you and Nyla deserve a chance." Lyria's defiance softened, replaced by a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in years. "I've spent so long fighting alone," she admitted. "I didn't think anyone would care enough to fight with me." "You're not alone anymore," Caden said, his tone firm. "Not while I'm here." They arrived at Caden's makeshift outpost, a small but well-organized sanctuary nestled in the remains of an old transport hub. Inside, he immediately set to work, administering medicine to Nyla and preparing a warm meal for Lyria. As Lyria ate, she watched him move with practiced efficiency, tending to other patients and organizing supplies. "You run this place on your own?" she asked, her tone laced with disbelief. "Mostly," Caden replied with a shrug. "I get the occasional supply drop, but it's not much. We make do." Lyria's voice softened. "You've saved more lives than most armies ever could." Caden looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I just do what needs to be done. And right now, what needs to be done is keeping you and Nyla safe." For the first time in years, Lyria allowed herself to believe that survival wasn't just a dream. Under Caden's care, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. In the days that followed, Lyria and Nyla began to recover under Caden's care. The small medical outpost became a haven of sorts, its modest facilities offering warmth and safety in a world otherwise ravaged by war. Nyla, once frail and silent, grew stronger each day, her laughter slowly returning to fill the once solemn air. Lyria remained cautious, though her gratitude for Caden's efforts was undeniable. She helped where she could, organizing supplies and assisting with patients. Despite her initial reluctance, she found herself drawn to Caden's quiet determination. One evening, as Caden cleaned his equipment, Lyria approached. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her tone softer than before. "Not just for us, but for everyone you help?" Caden looked up, his hands pausing. "Because I've seen what happens when people turn away. I can't save everyone, but I can save someone." Lyria studied him, her guarded exterior cracking. You've done more for us in days than anyone else has in years. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to, Caden said simply. Seeing you and Nyla get better is enough. Their peace was short-lived. Rumors began to spread of bounty hunters in the area, hired by Zalara's overseers to track down Lyria. Word of her survival had reached the wrong ears, and the overseers were determined to crush any symbol of rebellion. Caden overheard the whispers during a supply run to a nearby village. Returning to the outpost, his expression was grim. We need to talk, he told Lyria. Her heart sank as she saw his serious demeanor. They've found us, haven't they? Not yet, Caden replied, his tone steady. But they're looking. We have to be ready. Lyria nodded, her defiance rekindled. I won't let them take Nyla. Not again. You won't have to, Caden assured her. We'll face this together. The attack came sooner than either of them expected. As night fell, the sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the ruins. Caden's sharp eyes caught the glint of weapons in the moonlight. They're here, he said, grabbing his rifle. Lyria, stay with Nyla and keep her safe. Lyria hesitated, her protective instincts clashing with her desire to fight. I can help, she said, her voice firm. You will, Caden replied, handing her a small blaster. But your priority is Nyla. I'll handle the rest. The bounty hunters struck with precision, their movements betraying years of experience. Caden used the terrain to his advantage, setting traps and using his knowledge of the ruins to outmaneuver them. Despite being outnumbered, his tactical expertise gave him the upper hand. Lyria, meanwhile, held her ground in the outpost, her blaster aimed at the entrance. When one of the hunters breached the perimeter, she fired without hesitation, her shot finding its mark. Her hands trembled afterward, but her resolve didn't waver. As the battle raged on, Nyla clung to Lyria, her small voice trembling. Mama, are we going to be okay? Lyria knelt down, her tone gentle but firm. Yes, my love. Mr. Caden is protecting us, and I'll protect you. Nothing will hurt us as long as we're together. Her words gave Nyla the courage to stay calm, even as the sounds of gunfire echoed around them. Caden, using his final trap, detonated a concealed explosive that collapsed part of the structure, cutting off the attackers' escape route. With their numbers dwindling and their morale shaken, the bounty hunters retreated, leaving the ruins silent once more. Returning to the outpost, Caden found Lyria and Nyla huddled together, unharmed but shaken. It's over, he said, his voice calm despite his exhaustion, for now. Lyria stood, her eyes meeting his. You risked everything for us. Again. I'd do it 100 times, Caden replied. You're worth it. For the first time, Lyria allowed herself to truly believe his words. In that moment, the bond between them deepened, forged in the fire of shared struggle and unwavering determination. Together, they knew they would face whatever came next, and they would face it as a team. The attack on the outpost left Caden, Lyria, and Nyla shaken but resolute. Knowing the overseers wouldn't stop, Caden began preparing for the next inevitable assault. The bounty hunters were a warning. Something worse would come. Caden worked tirelessly to strengthen their defenses. Using salvaged materials, he fortified the outpost's walls and created makeshift barricades. Lyria, no longer content to stay idle, assisted with every task. Her determination to protect Nyla mirrored Caden's steadfast resolve. You've got a knack for this, Caden remarked as Lyria helped him rig a tripwire. Lyria gave a faint smile, wiping sweat from her brow. Survival isn't new to me, Caden, but it's easier when you're not doing it alone. Their shared glances grew longer, their exchanges more meaningful. Amidst the chaos, an unspoken connection began to bloom. During a routine scouting trip, Caden encountered Rylus, a smuggler and informant with a knack for hearing secrets. Rylus's expression was grim as he delivered the news. The overseers know she's here. They're sending a full strike team. How long do we have? Caden asked, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. Not long, Rylus replied. A day, maybe 2. They'll burn everything to the ground to get her. Caden returned to the outpost, his face grim but his resolve unwavering. He gathered Lyria and Nyla to share the news. They're coming, he said bluntly. And this time, it's going to be worse. Lyria's face paled, but she straightened her shoulders. We'll fight, she said. We've survived this long, we'll do it again. You're not fighting alone, Caden assured her. We'll face them together. Caden rallied the remaining settlers in the area, a ragtag group of refugees and survivors who had little experience in combat, but plenty of will to fight. With Lyria's help, he trained them, teaching basic defense tactics and how to handle makeshift weapons. "We don't need to beat them outright," Caden explained to the group. "We just need to outlast them." Lyria, watching him lead, felt a spark of hope despite the looming danger. "You have a way of inspiring people," she told him later as they worked on reinforcing the perimeter. Caden shrugged. "It's not inspiration. It's survival." Lyria shook her head, her voice soft but firm. "It's more than that. You make people believe there's something worth fighting for." The dawn of the second day brought the sound of engines and the sight of armored vehicles cresting the horizon. The Overseer's strike team had arrived, their numbers overwhelming compared to the small group defending the outpost. Caden positioned his makeshift militia strategically, using the terrain and their traps to slow the enemy's advance. "Stay calm," he told them. "Stick to the plan." Lyria stood beside him, her blaster at the ready. "I won't let them take Nyla," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "They won't," Caden promised, his gaze unwavering. "Not while I'm here." The strike team attacked with precision, their heavy weaponry cutting through the outpost's defenses. Caden's traps and strategic planning bought precious time, but the defenders were pushed to their limits. Lyria proved to be a fierce fighter, her determination unshakable as she protected the bunker where Nyla and other non-combatants were hiding. When an enemy soldier breached the line, she didn't hesitate, her blaster finding its mark. Caden, meanwhile, coordinated the battle with military precision, moving between positions to bolster morale and provide reinforcements where needed. His calm under pressure inspired the defenders to fight harder, refusing to give up even as the odds seemed insurmountable. As the battle raged on, the strike team began targeting the bunker. Lyria, realizing the danger, made a decision. "Caden, I need you to keep them safe," she said, her voice urgent. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, catching her arm. "I can draw them away," she explained. "They're here for me. If I lead them into the ruins, they'll follow." "No," Caden said firmly. "We do this together." Lyria's gaze softened. "You've given us so much, Caden. Let me protect Nyla the way you've protected us." Before he could stop her, she slipped away, firing shots to draw the enemy's attention. Caden cursed under his breath, his heart pounding as he directed the defenders to cover her retreat. Lyria's diversion worked, splitting the enemy forces and giving the defenders a chance to regroup. Caden, unwilling to leave her behind, led a small team into the ruins to find her. They navigated the crumbling structures, using the terrain to ambush the distracted soldiers. When they finally found Lyria, she was cornered, but still fighting, her blaster empty as she prepared to face the soldiers hand to hand. Caden's team opened fire, driving the attackers back and pulling her to safety. "You're insane," Caden said, his voice rough with emotion, "but I'm glad you're on my side." Lyria managed a faint smile despite her exhaustion. "I couldn't let them take everything we've fought for." As the last of the strike team retreated, the defenders emerged victorious, though battered and weary. The outpost was damaged, but it stood, a testament to their resilience. Caden found Lyria tending to Nyla, who clung to her mother with relief. He knelt beside them, his expression softening. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did," Lyria replied, her gaze steady. "Because you've shown me that some things are worth fighting for." Caden reached for her hand, his touch firm but gentle. "We're in this together, always." In that moment, the bond between them deepened, forged in fire and unshakable in its strength. Together, they prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing they would face them as a united front. The victory at the outpost was hard-won but fragile. Caden, Lyria, and the other defenders spent the next few days fortifying their position, knowing the overseers wouldn't accept defeat so easily. The small settlement around the outpost became a haven for displaced families who had heard of the rebellion, and the influx of new faces brought both hope and new challenges. In the quiet hours after a long day of work, Caden found Lyria sitting on a low wall overlooking the smoldering ruins of the battlefield. Her silver skin gleamed faintly in the moonlight, her expression unreadable as she watched Nyla play with other children nearby. "You've been quiet," Caden said, sitting beside her. Lyria glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Quiet doesn't mean peaceful. He followed her gaze to Nyla, who was laughing as she chased a makeshift toy. She's happy? That's all that matters. Lyria's smile faded. For now. But how long can we keep this up? How long before they send more soldiers, more weapons? Caden placed a reassuring hand on hers. We'll be ready. We've already shown them we're not an easy target. She looked at him, her eyes softening. You give me hope, Caden, even when I want to believe there's none left. As the days passed, the bond between Caden and Lyria deepened. They worked side by side to prepare the settlement for the inevitable return of the overseers, their shared purpose bringing them closer. One evening, as they repaired the outpost's outer walls, Lyria paused, her voice quiet. You've done so much for us. Why? Caden looked at her, his expression thoughtful. Because I see what's worth fighting for. You, Nyla, everyone here, you're the reason I do this. Her heart swelled at his words, the walls she had built around herself beginning to crumble. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't dictated by fear. Their fragile peace was shattered when a scout returned with grim news. They're coming, he said, his voice trembling. A full battalion, tanks, air support, everything. The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation sank in. Caden took charge immediately, rallying the defenders and outlining a plan. We can't beat them head-on, he said, his tone firm. But we can outsmart them. We'll use the terrain and the ruins to our advantage. We've done it before. We'll do it again. Lyria stepped forward, her voice steady. And I'll fight alongside you. Caden hesitated, his protective instincts flaring, but he saw the resolve in her eyes. Then we fight together, he said. At dawn, the Overseer's forces arrived, their armored vehicles and aircraft casting long shadows over the settlement. The defenders braced themselves, their makeshift barricades and weapons a stark contrast to the enemy's overwhelming firepower. Caden stood at the front, his rifle in hand, and his voice steady as he gave orders. Hold the line, stick to the plan, we can do this. Lyria was stationed at a key defensive position, her blaster ready. Nyla, along with other non-combatants, was hidden in a secure bunker beneath the outpost. Lyria's heart ached at the thought of being separated from her daughter, but she pushed her fear aside. Stay strong for me, my love, she had whispered to Nyla before leaving. The Overseers attacked with ruthless precision, their tanks advancing and aircraft strafing the settlement. Caden's traps slowed them down, the terrain working against their heavy vehicles. The defenders, though outnumbered, fought with fierce determination. Lyria proved to be a formidable fighter, her sharp instincts and unwavering resolve inspiring those around her. When an enemy squad attempted to flank their position, she led a counterattack, driving them back with strategic precision. Caden, moving between defensive points, coordinated the battle with military precision. His calm under pressure kept the defenders focused, his presence a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. As the battle raged on, the Overseers deployed a massive artillery unit, its firepower threatening to overwhelm the settlement's defenses. Caden realized they had to take it out or risk losing everything. We need to disable that gun, he said to Lyria during a brief moment of reprieve. But it's heavily guarded. Then we'll do it together, she replied, her tone resolute. Leaving the main defenses in capable hands, Caden and Lyria led a small team on a daring mission to flank the artillery position. Using the ruins for cover, they approached the enemy unit undetected. The firefight that ensued was intense, every second a battle for survival. Caden's tactical expertise and Lyria's sharp shooting turned the tide, and they managed to disable the artillery with a well-placed explosive charge. With their heavy weapon neutralized, the Overseer's forces began to falter. The defenders, emboldened by the victory, launched a coordinated counterattack, driving the enemy into retreat. As the last of the Overseer's forces fled, a cheer erupted from the defenders. The settlement had survived, its people proving that resilience and unity could stand against even the most formidable foes. Back at the outpost, Caden and Lyria reunited with Nyla, who ran into her mother's arms, her small face lighting up with joy. "You're okay, Mama?" Nyla exclaimed. Lyria held her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, my love, we're okay." Caden watched them with a quiet smile, his heart full. When Lyria looked up at him, her expression was one of profound gratitude. "We couldn't have done this without you," she said, We did it together, Caden replied, and we'll keep doing it. For her. For all of us. In that moment, amidst the ruins of war, hope flickered brighter than ever. Together, they had faced the storm and emerged stronger, their bond unshakable, and their future worth fighting for. The retreat of the Overseer's forces was not the end. Days after the victory, Caden, Lyria, and the defenders of the outpost learned that the Overseers had called for reinforcements, a massive battalion led by King Drelkor, the ruthless ruler of Zalara. Drelkor was infamous for his cruelty, and his intervention meant annihilation. In a hastily called meeting, Caden addressed the settlement's leaders. "We've shown we can fight, but this is different," he said, his tone grave. "If Drelkor comes, it won't just be soldiers, it'll be devastation." Lyria stood beside him, her defiance burning bright. "We won't let him take what we've built. If we stand together, we can make this a fight he'll regret." Her words ignited a spark in the room. The settlers, inspired by their recent victory and Lyria's courage, vowed to stand their ground. Plans were made, defenses reinforced, and alliances sought with nearby resistance groups. As preparations continued, Lyria spent time with Nyla, knowing the coming battle would be their most dangerous yet. Sitting under the shade of a crumbling archway, she braided Nyla's hair, her hands trembling slightly. "Mama," Nyla asked, her voice small, "will the bad men come back?" Lyria paused, then kissed the top of her daughter's head. "They might, my love. But Mr. Caden and I will keep you safe." Nyla nodded, her trust in her mother and Caden absolute. "You're the bravest mama in the galaxy." Lyria's heart swelled at her daughter's words, giving her the strength to face the storm ahead. When King Drelkor's forces arrived, the settlement braced for impact. His flagship hovered ominously above the ruins, its shadow casting a pall over the defenders. From the ground, tanks and heavily armed soldiers advanced, their movements precise and overwhelming. Caden coordinated the defenders, his voice calm but commanding. "Remember the plan. Stick to your positions and hold the line." Lyria, stationed at a key defensive point, took a deep breath as the first wave of enemy forces approached. "For Nyla," she whispered to herself, steadying her aim. The battle began with an explosion of noise and fire. The defenders fought with everything they had, their determination turning the ruins into a fortress. Lyria's sharp shooting and Caden's tactical brilliance kept the enemy at bay, but the sheer numbers began to take their toll. As the battle raged, King Drelkor himself descended to the battlefield. Encased in imposing armor, he led his forces with ruthless efficiency, his booming voice carrying over the chaos. "Surrender the traitor and the child," he demanded, "and I'll grant the rest of you mercy." Caden stepped forward, his rifle in hand. "You'll get neither," he said, his voice unwavering. "This ends here." Drelkor sneered. "A mere human stands against me. How amusing. Let's see how long you last." Knowing they couldn't match Drelkor's forces head-on, Caden devised a desperate plan. The ruins' ancient power conduits, long dormant, could be overloaded to create a massive explosion. It would destroy a significant portion of the enemy's forces, but came with a risk. It would leave the settlement vulnerable to the shockwave. "We don't have a choice," Caden told Lyria as they prepared the conduits. "If this works, it'll give us a chance to end this." Lyria nodded, her resolve firm. "Then let's make it count." While Caden and a small team set the explosives, Lyria led a diversion, drawing Drelkor's forces away from the critical areas. Her sharp aim and fearless presence turned the tide, giving Caden the time he needed. In the chaos, Drelkor confronted Lyria directly. "You think you can defy me, traitor?" he roared. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Lyria met his gaze, her voice steady. "I've already won, Drelkor. You just don't know it yet." Caden detonated the conduits, the resulting explosion tearing through the battlefield. The shockwave obliterated Drelkor's forces and disabled his flagship, forcing it to retreat. The defenders, though battered, cheered as the enemy was driven away. Drelkor, injured but alive, was pulled from the battlefield by his remaining soldiers. His reign of terror was far from over, but for now, Zalara had a chance to breathe. As the dust settled, the survivors gathered to assess the damage and celebrate their hard-fought victory. Caden and Lyria reunited with Nyla, who ran to them with tears of relief in her eyes. "You're okay," she cried, throwing her arms around them. Lyria held her daughter tightly, her voice trembling. "Yes, my love, we're okay." Caden placed a hand on Lyria's shoulder, his expression soft. You were incredible out there. So were you, Lyria replied, her gaze filled with gratitude and something deeper. We couldn't have done this without you. Caden smiled, his voice steady. We did it together, and we'll keep doing it. For her? For all of us. In the aftermath of the battle, the settlement became a beacon of hope for Zalara, its people united by the courage and determination of a human medic, a rebellious alien mother, and a resilient child. Together, they proved that even in the darkest of times, love and defiance could light the way forward.